Hello, and welcome to the Angus and Pete Show. Views and opinions are strictly those of the presenters and their guests and should not be taken as advice. Goodness knows, we're not qualified to advise you about anything. Side effects may include mild amusement and occasional enlightenment with feelings of embarrassment, apathy, disappointment, and pity.
Welcome to episode 13. I'm Angus Pacey.
And I'm Pete Brown, and we are the Angus and Pete Show.
The place where you can listen to two guys chatting about the riveting world of customer engagement.
That's customer engagement, otherwise known as call centre, contact centre, customer service, customer experience, CX, and whatever else you're calling it this week.
If you want to know more about us, check us out on LinkedIn.
So, Angus, what's in the postbag this week?
First one got today, Carlos from Barcelona. He's a senior pre-sales technical SE person with one of the large vendors. And he got in touch and he said, I've referenced the Angus and Pete Show in my presentation as a really good independent source of customer engagement, customer experience knowledge and insight. And in doing that, it's making him look really good.
Excellent.
So I guess we've got a proof point that somebody's actually doing something with this. And then the second one, Shelley from Toronto, she said, just listen to episode 4, the AI exhibitionist, and noted comments about how the messaging coming from a customer engagement vendor and salespeople, is very similar, if not identical.
Okay.
And she's a new business sales exec, and she's got a really good question. How do I make my customer experience contact center sales pitch stand out and be different?
Ooh, that's a biggie. That is a big question.
That is one mega challenge because pretty much all the vendors are the same. And we saw that at the expos where you could take the label off any of the vendor stands and they're all saying the same thing, just with a slightly different color.
Right.
So I think here's a challenge for you, Pete.
It's my challenge, is it?
Yeah, it's your time. It's your challenge this time. What do you need to consider if you're going to go and pitch to a buyer if you are in Shelley's position?
The first thing that you should bear in mind is that our technology is important, but it's increasingly not the centerpiece of sales activity. It's all normalizing. Technology is increasingly similar, if not the same, which is reflected in the messaging. So actually, what are the differentiators? The differentiators are who you buy from and the way that you buy.
So it's relationships.
Well, yeah, it's relationships, but it's also a bit more than relationships. It's that feeling of assurance, that feeling of not taking a risk. So it is a relationship, but it's in the broader sense. And I guess there's also, organizational credibility. If you're going to buy something as important as CX and contact center technology, which is the core of most people's interface with their customers, so you want to be buying it from credible sources.
So I think people buy from people.
Absolutely.
And they've got to trust them.
They have. The other things that I would consider right up front, and this may be a statement of the bleeding obvious, but it needs to be said, buyers are not interested in your sales process, your pitching, your qualifying, your closing. That's not something that they're interested in. What they're interested in, what they're focused on, is their buying process. Business case, evaluation, and the R word again, minimizing risk. Salespeople forget that. An easy thing to forget when you've got sales managers and sales directors banging on about the sales process all the time internally, and then you've got to put your external hat on and start thinking about the customer. It's not an easy thing to do, but I think increasingly it's a necessary thing to do.
But buyers understand the vendors and the partners, the sellers, their selling processes. Because when it comes to the end of the quarter, the last 4 weeks,
yeah,
they know exactly how to drive these deals to get good deals out of the guys that are selling.
Yeah, but they do. I guess maybe, Shelley, one of the first things that you should do is make the effort to make absolutely sure that your customers know that you care as much about their buying process as you do about the internal agenda of your selling process.
So you've got to put yourself in the buyer's shoes as well. Think about what you need to do within that environment. How are you going to speak to them? What are your messages? How are you going to drive that process so that you're helping them through their process? What else can you think about?
Do you know what? Then you come on to the whole communication strategy. Put yourself in your audience's shoes, in this case, the buyer. What's the most important thing to the buyers that we speak to? And do you know what? I learned this a long time ago. Buyers are human beings, right? Like the rest of us, believe it or not. And when you're dealing with human beings, you learn fairly quickly that there's one thing that we prioritize over everything else. And that is what's best for us.
Yeah.
Personal agenda makes the world go round. And it's no different when you're selling. I learned a lesson way back in the midst of time, my first account management job, which absolutely nails on the fact that personal agenda and understanding it makes the difference between being successful and not in a sales environment. I had a customer that I was trying to break into. I can't say who they were, but they are Britain's biggest gas supplier. Bit of a clue there. And I was dealing with a telecommunications manager there, and he was buying modems from me. Remember modems, Angus? And I used to have some in the boot of my car, and we used to have them in stock. And these things were, anything between 500 and maybe £2,500 based on the spec. And I got this guy on the phone one day, and I said, "Look, come and talk to us. Why wouldn't you come and talk to us? It's all about price," he said. "Okay, fine. Well, I know where we are in the supply chain, and I can guarantee that I can beat any price that you've got by at least 2%. I'll make that commitment to you. Just give me a chance." So a couple of days later, he calls me. "Pete," he says, "I need half a dozen of these boxes. What can you do for me?" So I gave him a price, and he said, "No, I need you to do better than that. This is what I've got." So I was as good as my word, did 2% better. He was happy. He agreed that he was ready to place the order. He said to me, "Send me a quote. I'll get it signed off. I'll get a PO. I'll be back to you in the morning to get this done." And just before he went, he had a Columbo moment, and he said, "Oh, just one more thing. Do you take credit cards?" And I said, "No, we don't." And he was gone. Didn't think any more of it. Anyway, he didn't come back to me. I couldn't get a hold of him, and he just disappeared. Until about a month later, I met him at an event, and I said, "You never got back to me. What happened?" He said, "You know what? The problem is you don't take credit cards." "Why is that a problem?" He said, "Well, I actually buy these bits and pieces on my personal credit card, my personal American Express card."
What? So he was doing procurement's job on his own Amex.
Back in the day,
other credit cards are available.
Back in the day, these things went on, and basically, he told me that he was getting a shed load of loyalty points for every order that he paid for, and him and his wife were off having effectively free holidays once a quarter at least. Personal agenda. So he was not really as interested in what was right for the business as he was in what was right for him. Maybe a bit of an extreme case, but nevertheless something that I've never forgotten.
It is an extreme case, but it wasn't uncommon. Pre-2000, this was more common than people think.
Yeah, exactly. So although things may have changed, there's a little bit more process, a little bit more diligence around the way that things are bought. And goodness knows we've spoke about those in the 3 RFP episodes. Today, human beings, buyers, are concerned more about personal consequences of a decision than what's good for the business in a lot of cases. Now, that may be an unpopular opinion, maybe a bit radical, but come and tell me I'm wrong, because I don't think I am in a lot of cases.
So what you're talking about is somebody being scared about screwing up.
The fear of messing up is a far more powerful motivator than the fear of missing out, i.e. not doing something. If we don't reduce that risk, reduce that perception of complexity and stress and anxiety that goes with making a decision, then no decision is often the most attractive option for a buyer if they're not completely comfortable. And we know this as salespeople. We know this. We know that our biggest competitor is apathy and the status quo.
Okay, so with that background, how do you build a pitch? What are the kind of key points that people need to think about? You're going in to speak to a buyer. You've got the first meeting.
Yeah.
So you're at that point where you're now in the room. Yeah. You've got their attention. What are those kind of key tips that you would think about?
So here's another statement. People want to be told what to buy.
Okay. A lot of people are going to go, what?
People want to be told what to buy. If you've managed to get in the door, there's a little bit of trust, there's a little bit of credibility, use it. Buyers will respond well to a clear recommendation. Shows the courage of your convictions, it shows confidence, and it shows an opinion. And it's a good thing. The earlier on in the sales process, the better. If I think about my preferred retail experience, if I'm going out to buy a pair of trousers, a new pair of trousers, and whether it's online or in store, I want to approach that retail environment and I want it to say to me, "Hi Pete, thanks for coming. We know you're after a new pair of trousers. And we've got two options for you. They're both going to look fabulous, but we absolutely recommend that you go for this pair. I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to do it.
Path of least resistance.
It's easy, and it takes the pressure of decision making away from me. It's easy to do. It's psychology.
So you've got to work on the premise. If you're going to make a recommendation, you must have done some homework and have an idea, at least at a high level, what challenges people in that industry or that type of company typically will face.
Absolutely. But don't get hung up on having lots of information. So do you remember Colin Powell?
Yeah, he was that. He was the one that went to the UN and stood up and spun a fairy tale that got us all into trouble in Iraq.
Well, let's not get political, Angus, because that way madness lies.
It's a statement of fact.
Yes, it is a statement of fact. Goodness knows that you're good at stating facts. Anyway, Colin Powell had this rule, the 40-70 rule.
Okay.
And he basically said that when it comes to information in the context of making a decision, if you have 40% or less of the necessary information, you haven't got enough information to actually make an informed decision. Therefore, you're basing your decisions on guesswork. Don't do it. What he also said is if you have 70% of the information, striving to get more becomes procrastination. You don't need 100%. You just need about 70% maximum. So between 40 and 70 is about 50 or 60% of the information. So you don't have to know everything about the buyer, about their organisation. You just have to know about 50% of what's going on, and you've got everything you need to make a recommendation. A clear recommendation. So rather than banging on about endless choices, make a clear recommendation, and it removes the perception of complexity and risk from the buyer.
So make a clear recommendation. How many options do you put in? Because you can make a recommendation that says, I can give you 7 clear choices.
Yeah, so stop. Options is just another way of saying confusion as far as I'm concerned. Goodness knows, contact centres and CX tech has infinite options. In fact, the whole industry has made a very good job of making it as complicated as it can possibly be. Do not offer lots of options. Keep your options to an absolute minimum. The paradox of choice is a very negative influence on making a decision. So there's something called Netflix paralysis, Angus. Have you got Netflix?
Yeah. Is this when you sit down with whoever's sitting with you and you go, what do you want to watch? And they go, what do you want to watch? And then you sit and go around in circles for 10 minutes.
Well, yeah, and what you do is you go scrolling through hundreds and hundreds of options on the screen, and you sit there and talk to each other about the fact that there's nothing to watch, which is one outcome. The other outcome is when you do decide, there's a lingering doubt that you may have picked the wrong thing. Too much choice is not a good thing because options have a direct impact on buying behaviour. Back in 2000, a couple of psychologists, Sheena Iyengar and Mark Lepper, set up a tasting booth in a supermarket. A tasting booth for gourmet jams or jelly, depending on where you are. Let's say preserves. Hopefully we all understand what they are. There you go, multilingual. They set up this tasting booth for these preserves, and some days they offered 6 options, and some days they offered 24 options. And what they established was, when it came to purchasing behaviour, more people came by when there were 24 jams, preserves, and more tasting went on. But when there were only 6 options, the customers were 10 times more likely to buy. Let me just say that again, 10 times more likely to buy. Too many choices overwhelm your buyer and it makes them less likely to commit. It's as simple as that.
So the way I would translate this is that when you're early on in the sales cycle, SEs, pin your ears back and listen. The wrong thing to do too early is to say to the customer, what do you want? We'll design it for you. Because at that point in time, you've just fallen straight into this trap.
Yes. Make a recommendation with limited options, but a well-defined recommendation based on some information. Do it quickly, do it assertively, and that will start to build a rapport based on you as a trusted advisor.
Yeah, and if you think about it, sales cycle in our space is not 6 days. It tends to be closer to 6 months. So
right, if you're lucky.
It doesn't matter what you start with at this point in time. You've got to build that trust, make the person comfortable with you, and it'll evolve. Okay. You need to drag out your PowerPoint deck as fast as you can.
Yeah.
What do you put in that deck, or do you even use it? Yeah.
I would say it depends. Sometimes, if it's a more formal setting, probably. If it's an initial intro meeting or an elevator pitch or, a fairly informal account review, maybe not. But it doesn't matter, because the whole premise around the content of your pitch, of your presentation, remains the same. We've already said that the whole CX, contact center technology piece, has always been relatively complex, and it's getting more complex. It's now more crucial than ever than whatever it is you say, whatever it is you pitch, whatever it is you present, it's relatable and relevant to the person that you're sitting in front of. The good news is that everyone you are talking to is a consumer like you are. So actually, we're in the very fortunate position of what we sell. Everyone is touching it and feeling it and using it and experiencing it all day, every day. They understand what CX and customer engagement is, not in technical terms, but in consumer terms. And that's the language that you should be using when you're engaging with buyers, particularly business buyers.
So all we've got to do at this point, they just need to join the dots to how it actually happens. And the easiest way to do that, let's put up a slide with a diagram.
No, stop. Be honest. If you're a salesperson, how many of you have got a diagram in the first 10 slides in your deck? We've all seen them, right? There's a diagram, and there's some communication channels on the left, and there's some business systems or whatnot on the right, and in the middle there's a rat's nest of technology that's delivering the solution, in inverted commas. It is the worst thing you can put in front of a business buyer, because A, they don't understand it, and B, if they did understand it, they don't care about it. They don't care about your architectures. They don't care about your speeds and feeds. What they care about is what it does for them, not what it is.
They get measured in outcomes. They don't get measured on how sexy your technology is.
Absolutely. So keep your techie slides for emergencies. And what I mean by that is, you better have them, because you will come across a smart ass in the room who sits there just writing things down to trip you up on, and then you'll get hit with one technical question after another. You better have your stuff there, but do not lead on it, and do not make it the centerpiece, because it's not important. And as we move into the cloud, it becomes less important, because the technology has nothing to do with the customer. Service delivery is to do with the customer.
It's quite interesting. I've seen this in real world in a meeting with a customer.
Mm-hmm.
I think there were 4 people in the room. 3 were business users. IT snuck in. One managed to weasel their way in.
Oh, no.
And what I did notice was that the team that were presenting were very good at keeping it at a business level and to outcomes. They obviously knew what pain points were hitting. And the IT guys did not get a word in edgeway. They tried a couple of times, but the business guys shut them down.
Right.
Because they were having a business discussion. The technical discussion happened 3 meetings later. It will happen, and it needs to happen. But at the beginning, what you want to do is get your business stakeholders on side.
Right, absolutely. So know about the technology and know where to go when you need to talk about it, but don't start there. For goodness sake, don't start there. The other thing that I think has changed, certainly since I was trained on sales back in the day, when we were told that solution selling was all about not reeling off a list of features, but relating those features to benefits. slides with bullet points and, cut in half on the left-hand side of features, on the right-hand side of benefits. That doesn't cut it anymore. Your bullet points do not cut it anymore. What buyers want to hear are compelling stories about real-world examples. You need to help them to visualize your solution in action and the potential for it in their business. It's the easiest sales pitch in the world for us because everyone's got a mobile device, everyone's a consumer. And you've got to read your audience, because if you get a 15-minute slot with a COO or a CFO, a CMO, someone in the C-suite, you've got to cut your cloth accordingly. Maybe there is a time to just pick up a pen, jot some stuff down on a whiteboard. The basic messaging around your core proposition remains the same as we've said. Make a recommendation, reduce the options, demonstrate the whole thing with compelling stories, and remember, you're looking to reduce the perception of complexity and reduce the complexion of risk.
So you've got the point where you've got your stories, right? I get that. That makes loads of sense. We've seen this all the time. At some point in time in that dialogue, might not be in the same meeting, but it might be in a follow-on. They say, what does it look like? How does this actually work? What does it look like? How do I see it?
Show me the product.
Yeah. So, I mean,
Right.
Quite often it's either show me the product, but more often than that, it's like, show me how it works.
I've seen some frightening things in my time when it comes to product demos. People not listening and turning a request for a quick show and tell into a 2-hour training session. We're going to do this to you whether you like it or not. You're going to see every little bell and whistle that we've got to show you. Pin your ears back, try not to cry of boredom. We're going for it. And that's what we do. What works? What works is using demonstrations of relatable and relevant scenarios to back up your stories.
I think the other point to add to this one is that in this world of hybrid meetings and decision makers and stakeholders being everywhere, quite often your audience is on a flat screen.
Right.
And if you can't hold their attention for 3, 4, 5 minutes so that you can get your key things across, you stuffed, because it's very easy to swivel chair and go and start doing email.
Right. Less is more. If you show them not a basic, we're not talking about basic demonstrations here. We're talking about quick, engaging, compelling demonstrations of scenarios that may be relevant to their business. If they want to know more, they'll ask you. And if they ask you, it's a buying signal.
Get into your next meeting and you can see.
Right, exactly. That's the whole point, right? We're moving it forward. Don't let everything out of the bag in one go. Tease them. Leave them wanting more.
You said something earlier. You said that one of the biggest challenges that we've got to overcome as sellers is that fear of cocking it up from a buyer. And that can put the brakes on anything. So how do you do that?
So risk, we're talking about risk.
Yeah, I think so.
We're talking about minimizing and removing risk. Easy to say, difficult to do. So first of all, what is the risk? Buyers are thinking about their business. There's risk to the business. This is the thing that they all articulate. However, far closer to their heart, in my view, is making a decision that risks damage to their reputation and their status, that risks making their lives busier and more complicated. How many times have you seen that? This is a good idea, but it looks like a shitload of work, and I'm frankly not really up for that. So let's try and do something else. And ultimately, there's the risk of getting fired. It happens, and it happens more often than people think. So I think we've got another advantage here with the CX and customer engagement piece. In the cloud, it's almost designed to help us to minimize risk. Minimizing risk is starting small, getting some quick wins before expanding. If we say that to a customer, it sounds relatively risk-free. It's an easy start. If you provide some commercial guarantees, flexible contracts, if they don't like it or it feels risky, they can get out again. Start small, give guarantees, reduce the perception of risk for the customer.
The other thing that you play into this, and it's exactly the same thing, just comes at it from a slightly different tack, because I've seen big contact center migrations. So we're talking about thousands of agents, and I've seen 50, 60 agents. And there's one theme that comes out when I watch their migrations happen. The big limiting factor is the ability of the business and the people to absorb all the new information and everything
Right.
that they learn. So that's a risk that people don't anticipate. But if you think about it, you throw a whole new world at somebody, they're not going to pick it up in 3 seconds.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's also something about pacing with your customer and making sure that you're not overloading them too early. There was a time when transformation was the word. There's still people with it in their job title. Business transformation analyst, director of business transformation, la, 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 la. Increasingly, I'm seeing if you say transformation to a business buyer, they freak out. You frighten them.
Because they've been doing a lot of it.
It sounds big. We've had enough transformation to last us a lifetime. What they want to hear about is steps and journeys. They want to hear about evolution, not revolution. And they want to minimize risk for themselves and for the business, but mostly for themselves.
Well, ultimately, it's a case of people work to live, not live to work.
That's it. So there you go. I've done a lot of talking. What did you gain from that? What are the takeaways?
Okay, let me just summarize this pretty rapidly. 1, personal agendas make the world go round.
Yeah.
Buyers are worried about personal consequences of decisions. So you've got to get over that. When you're engaging with them, don't give them too many options. Make a clear recommendation.
That really puts your flag in the ground and everything goes from there.
It just simplifies the situation for people.
Yeah.
And part of that is absolutely resist the temptation to provide lots of options. Making a clear recommendation doesn't mean one option, but at the same time, don't give them lots of options because too many of them lead to confusion, anxiety, and indecision. That paradox of choice is real. Keep your technical diagrams for emergencies. I think this is the biggest takeout for our community, I think. Wait. Business people don't care. Don't shoot yourself in the foot with bullet points. Tell stories.
Yeah.
You don't need to, if you need to send your PowerPoint presentation to the coloring in department in marketing, then your deck is wrong. And at the same time, if you ask to demo, please do not deliver a training course. That is not required. Remove the risk. Make it easy for people. Remove the risk. Now, buyers will perceive that risk in many ways. Start with small wins, scale it up, and talk about the journey, steps in the journey. And then the other thing, at the end of your presentations or your meetings, have a very clear call to action. Please do not put a label on the top of your PowerPoint slide that says call to action. It's a sales 101 thing, but be very clear on what the next step is, what happens next.
Yeah. And I think in all of that, I would just say one final thing. It's okay to take control. Customers often try to do that, particularly in structured procurement. But it's okay to take control and it's okay to stick to those principles. Customers won't ask you to do what we've just spoken about. Doesn't mean to say that it's not the right thing to do. Since when have customers always been right?
When have salespeople always been right?
Well, there is that as well. So between us, we'll work it out. That's what this podcast is all about.
We've covered a lot of information in this one. Salespeople, please feedback on this one. Tell us whether you agree, disagree. Have we missed something out? It would be interesting to get people's views. In the meantime, we'll be back next time with episode 13.
Yeah, please follow us on the Angus and Pete Show page on LinkedIn for news and notifications. Message us directly and tell us what you want us to talk about, how we're doing, and keep that post bag bulging.
As you should know by now, this show is available on all your favorite podcast platforms. So please do us a favor. Like, subscribe, and share our post to help us spread the word. However, Pete, before we go, it's that time of the week. What is the joke of the week?
Well, this week is a story about perils and pitfalls of selling technology.
Okay.
You ready?
This is going to be a challenge, this one.
There's a lesson here. There's a lesson here for us all, Angus. So this guy is looking for a new hearing aid. He goes into a store and the sales guy shows him a basic model for £100. And the guy says, no, I want the best. I want the best hearing aid. So the sales guy goes to the back of the store and there's a large safe there. He unlocks the safe, opens it, takes out a safety deposit box. He brings the safety deposit box to the counter and puts it down in front of the customer and opens it. And from out of the safety deposit box, he takes a very nice wooden presentation case, places it down and opens it. And inside is a very sleek device. The sales guy takes it out, puts it in the palm of his hand, holds it towards the customer and says, "This is the top of the range hearing aid. It is the best model money can buy, and it will cost you in excess of £5,000 because it is based on the latest and greatest technology." And the customer says, "Wow, the latest technology? What kind is it?" And the sales guy said, "It's about 3 o'clock.
Cheers, Pete.
Cheers, Angus.
Thanks for tuning in to the Angus and Pete Show. Remember, it's based on the personal views and opinions of the hosts and their guests. If you're feeling aggrieved or litigious, take a chill pill. There's already enough stress in the world. Don't forget to follow our page on LinkedIn and subscribe on your favourite podcast platform for more episodes. We'll see you next time. Oh, and tell your friends.